preparation for the film Souls by Malakai, written and directed. Um, it was an interesting experience because I was in New York when I received the script, and I took a walk from Harlem, 148th Street, all the way down to the Natural History Museum in the 40s. And I visited the Hayden Planetarium. The Hayden Planetarium is under the direction of Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. And so I strolled around and learned what I could learn because, as you know, and some folks who hadn't seen the film, Hattie Gray was a retired astrophysicist, the furthest thing from my experiences in the working world. And I have had many experiences being Jamaican. You know, we're known to have at least 5 jobs. However, never an astrophysicist. And I didn't hang around a lot of scientists either. So what I did, I went to the planetarium and strolled around and looked at some of the exhibits and the films about stars, because I do remember a line where I was telling my granddaughter, played by Nia Chanel, that a nebula was a cloud of stars that looked like dust. And I had never heard of what a nebula was, so I needed to really find out and get a feel for what it's like to be a scientist. And I picked up his book. I know it's showing backwards, but this book is by Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he is an astrophysicist, very popular. Everyone knows him, and this was a New York Times bestseller, and it was Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. And as you know, when we get these projects, we are sometimes in a hurry to learn and develop our character. So I thought that was the best route to take. Usually, particularly in this case, Souls was written and directed by Malakai based on, or I should say inspired by, her great-grandmother. And so this was a very personal story and project for her. I paid much more attention to what she wanted me to bring out and portray as Hattie Gray. I'm not that usually controlling on a set about my character unless intuitively I am feeling and hearing certain gestures, words, expressions that I believe should be shown on the film, and I would discuss that with the director ahead of time. Hattie Gray, the character, versus Johan Beckles, me. Let me tell you, this project, it was a serendipitous experience because as I started to read the description of the character, a lot of it was a reflection of me, aside from the science side. Hattie Gray was a widow, moi. Hattie Gray not only lost her husband, but also witnessed losing her son, which is one of the hardest things for a parent to go through, to witness your child passing on prior to your death. And in the case of Hattie Gray and also myself, my son was an adult, and he died at the age of 33. So I had been carrying those emotions earlier on and could easily project that on the screen. Crying was very easy for me. And the motivation of those experiences, and also witnessing my mother going through Alzheimer's as Hattie Gray was going through, and her 6-year-old, 9-year-old granddaughter was experiencing losing her grandmother and not fully understanding what was going on, why her grandmother couldn't remember her, was forgetful and slowly deteriorating. I witnessed that with my mother too. Hattie Gray in this case was 65. My mother was 97. And having had her in our lives for so long, it was really difficult for my siblings and I to see her deteriorate like that. So that was in my memory bank, and I drew on that. I drew on her gestures and her facial expressions when she would look at us and not recognize who we were. Or within that same day, all of a sudden she knows and she's talking to us as if everything was okay and she recognizes us. So I I pulled on those life experiences for this film, and it just floored me that all those characteristics and experiences was coming from my experiences too, very similar. Acting is not my first career. I had a career in broadcasting in Los Angeles, a very lucrative one. I had the number one talk show in Los Angeles, and I produced that for 3 years and continued on with other shows at KFI FM in actually it was KFI AM in Los Angeles, and so in broadcasting we had to all do recordings, promos for upcoming shows and what have you. And I was a broadcast major, broadcast film and TV major. That's how I fell into film, in being interested in film. And I was always a performer, but yes, from I was a child, always a performer, playing piano from the age of 6 on to 21 on stage, Little Carnegie. So I was always accustomed to being in front of an audience and speaking and accentuating my skills as a public speaker. So the voiceover didn't really require much preparation. I have to go back to my heritage because when I was in college, I had many interests. And as I mentioned earlier, I did decide to select experimenting with several majors. I fell back on broadcasting because I felt that I could gather from my interest in the arts also being informative to the greater public as a talk show producer. So my advice is you're focused on your passion. Go for that passion. Don't give up on it. But if it's in the arts, i.e. acting or filming, filmmaker behind, in front of the screen, wherever, know that you have also acquired another profession, another interest to fall back on. My parents had always stressed that. Being Jamaican, we always were expected to have 2 or 3 professions we could fall back on. And by profession, I don't mean that you had to go and get a degree to become a doctor, a lawyer, or something in those high professions. But just know that you have experience and skill in other careers, because as an artist, there's going to be those slow moments, those lulls where work is not coming through. I am a singer, I am a broadcaster, I am a teacher. I've had a 5-year career in the fashion industry. So all those things, all those skills I can fall back on, which I did. I relied on a full-time work when I was living in Los Angeles. I went back to acting when I left those full-time positions and started to hone my skills because I was preparing for retirement. When I used to go on set and do a lot of background work, I realized that a lot of the background actors were retired. There were these cute couples that come in and they have their life experiences, and they'd come in and sometimes they would consult if there was a need for consultation on particular professions that the actors are portraying. And I said, oh, I see, I could do that. And that's fun. And I don't have to worry about, having a cash flow in addition to pensions, which that is pretty much fading very quickly. I don't think that's offered by many businesses these days. But you need to continue honing your skills in what you selected as an actor. Hone those skills. Continue educating yourself. There's never something complete as an actor. You have to continue training. But also know that in your back pocket, you have other skills. And you can fill in those blank days when work is not coming in, and especially in the gig economy, and use them, because you got to keep the cash flow going to upkeep your lifestyle. And I never believed in the concept of starving artists then. So when I was selected for this role in Souls, I was already living life fully as a retired person in Arizona, and not worried about the income from this project, but more about the role that I'm playing, the story, the narrative, and the lack of money did not get in the way. So my advice is always to have something to fall back on. And thank you so much for having me.